Welcome to episode 5 of The Underlayer, where the real story lives, the surface story dies, and the truth underneath comes to life. I'm your host, David Young, and every week on this show, we peel back the layers, break old narratives, and move into the underlayer, the place where clarity lives, alignment takes shape, and your energy finally starts to come back. If you want to make changes in your life, you have to go beneath your own story. Today, I'm joined by Lisa De Nicola, and we're going to take a deep dive into relationships. Lisa is a leadership and executive coach and the founder of Her Lead and Rise, empowering mid to executive level leaders to elevate their emotional and relational intelligence. She helps leaders stay true to themselves while awakening them to their full potential. Lisa, it's great to see you again. Thanks for coming on the show.
So good to see you. You really do have that broadcaster voice. Like now that I'm seeing it in action, I'm remembering your post and I'm like, yeah, you
Yeah,
do. You sound like a radio host.
I had
Thank
a
you for having me. It's a
Yeah,
pleasure to be here.
yeah, you're welcome. I had a coworker a long time ago. She always used to say to me like, "You should be in radio. You have a voice for radio." Like I don't. She
Absolutely.
was like, every time I hear you talk, I'm like, I should be listening to that on a radio station. This is kind of
There's
before like streaming and podcasting was around, but it's not like what it was now. So still like DJs and like that was a little bit more popular. So that's
yeah.
yeah,
No, you absolutely there's like a frequency about it that hits like a note and like brings you in. That's
nice.
what I feel.
Thanks.
Compliment.
So yeah, it's great to have you on. We've known each other for a little bit through LinkedIn. We met in person this past summer when I was in Toronto, which
Nice.
was great.
So fun.
Um, you write really, really, for me, insightful LinkedIn posts, and it's typically around relationships, leadership. But what I really find interesting is that it's usually there's you really dive into like the correlation and how all of our relationships are intertwined and it's not separated. Like you have a work relationship, you have friend relationships, you have partner type relationships. Like it's all related,
Mhm.
and we don't necessarily always think about that. So like kind of how we are at home is how we are at work, which is how we are at home, and the cycle kind of perpetuates. So I think I want to start there. Just how did you become? I think of you as like a relationship expert. I don't know if you think of yourself that way, but that's how I think of you. Like how do you feel like that kind of transpired and came to be?
It's a new part of my work that I've been slowly introducing over the last, I'd probably say 6 months or so. And that's in big part of my own experience. And because we've been following each other for a little while, I'm sure you've caught on that I've been much more vocal and vulnerable in sharing some of those personal experiences.
Hmm.
And I've literally amassed quite a bit of experience over many years. Have a lot to offer in terms of supporting other women, some men for sure, but women most often are the ones that are drawn to me
Yeah.
in that sphere. And so what I've um, been doing in just my own evolution and learning is as I've been on this journey of understanding my relational patterns and how they've shown up in not only my romantic relationships, but also taking notice of how they were showing up in like friendships, client dynamics when I was in corporate, and then even in the last like 5 years when I went on my own, and most definitely in like the family dynamic. I have been trying to connect the dots to how it shows up in business, whether you are an entrepreneur, and a lot of my audience is in corporate,
Hmm.
um, because I didn't have that understanding before. And I think a lot of people, when they make that connection, if they can see how, shrinking in meetings is not just an isolated event, and it's not because you're nervous because of, your boss being in the room, or, I don't know, even a client that you're trying to impress, but this stems from, before, like childhood, even. And it's likely also showing up in your other relationships. And so that's for me is always a really interesting connection, and probably an important one that I would say, because we always want to look at things holistically. We don't want to look at things from an individual or, linear standpoint. I really want to invite people to look at how it shows up in all dynamics, so that when you go to the source of the wound, whatever it might be, and you can heal that, and then break the pattern. So if the pattern in meetings is to stay silent, when you start creating that safety within yourself, and now you can show up in a more confident and grounded way, you'll break it in all the other dynamics as well. And it takes practice, right?
Yeah, that's a good point in talking about the evolution. So at what point do you think, you said it's a relatively new thing? Did you start, were you journaling? Were you writing it down? Was there a moment where it caused you to look back and start to see the patterns? Like, was kind of what made you start to do this like reflection and kind of come like into this like next phase where you're
Yeah.
at now?
So, and this is what I shared in actually the other podcast that I just shared. So 2 years ago, like my world imploded, and I went through probably one of the most devastating and traumatic times in my life, my adult life, that I can remember, both personally and professionally. And I've always been very dedicated to my personal, my spiritual, and my professional development, but I had never gone as deep as I had gone 2 years ago, and it's continuing, right? I've gone a lot further ahead. I'm a lot further ahead than I was before, but this is a journey for a reason, and we don't do some work for a period of time and then stop. It's always like a lifelong journey, if you commit to it that way. So in that period 2 years ago, when when everything was kind of falling apart and I was in this crisis, I really was forced to look at, because I was willing to look, at what had really been the pattern that I just wasn't seeing. And there's usually more than one. So in that time when I was basically like trying to survive,
Sure.
um, I had gone to therapy. I was doing like energy and spiritual work with trusted like mentors and guides and so on. And it was with their support, and then a lot of my own self study that I traced it back to some childhood experiences that I had gone through, and not really understanding that that was um, a wound that unfortunately really shaped and influenced the choices that I was making
Mhm.
in my romantic partnerships, my friendships, even the family dynamic there, that's always there. And then also just witnessing it and understanding how it was showing up in my corporate career, because I was in corporate for about 15 years. And then even in the last 5, my entrepreneurial journey, how that was coming up in the form of like clients that I was attracting, weird like issues that I didn't quite always understand how to handle, but
Mhm.
when I sort of looked underneath the hood, I'll say, as I was recognizing, oh, like this is very similar to men that I would date. And this
Mm.
is also very similar to, how some of my friendships would look like, right? Either imbalanced or emotional unavailability, siphoning my energy.
Mhm.
um, and really like depleting me in a lot of different ways. So it wasn't in the form of just a reflective moment. It really was the catalyst of just a terrible time that I'd gone through. And it really inspired me to look at these different areas and finally break some patterns that were just torture in some cases. Like, just, I couldn't figure out how to get out of it and break it until I started doing some of this deeper work.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's so often the case, right? It's stuff from our past that we don't realize. I know I've done a lot of reading with kind of between up to like age 8 or 9. So much of that happens, which you have almost no control over. And you don't even a lot of times even have like a lot of even memories of it. But your environment, what you see, what you witness in relationships, um, whether it's parents or divorce or aunts, uncles, whatever. You see a lot of that stuff. You're exposed to a lot of that, which again, at the time, you're not paying much attention to because you're a kid and you're just doing what kids do. That's it's just so fascinating that that gets almost imprinted like into your DNA, into your psyche, subconscious, whatever. And then
Mm,
all these years later, right? There's like this big jump into like a early adulthood, and you start having different life experiences, but you're making a lot of these choices, you're doing these things that you don't understand, all from stuff that you saw that you don't even remember. Like
yeah.
it's really fascinating, and I've gotten into it a little bit, and I probably need to go deeper. um at what point was it through the therapy sessions or just through the whole situation that you started to see kind of those childhood whatever went there, and then how that was showing up. Like how did you get to that point, or how did you see
Yeah,
that?
so actually, there's two women that I met around the same time. So let's say 5 years ago, as part of a group, a Facebook group, actually. And I had worked with them separately and still do to this day. I actually wrapped up a program with one of my, I consider them both mentors. And at this point, they're also friendships that I've been able to develop. And they both separately at the time had just intuitively picked up on an experience that I had. I'm not going to share it here because
Yeah, that's
it's
fine.
it's quite heavy, and I didn't forewarn you, so I don't want to shock the shit out of you. Just listen to the other podcast and you'll understand.
Got it.
Um, but like for something that I hadn't even shared, and I had really never really talked about, processed in a safe manner, they were both able to see it. And when they brought it up to me, I was like, do you think that this, I remember to one of them, I was like, do you think that this experience impacted all of these relationships? And she like literally leaned in and she's like, 100%. And I was like, and I was like, and then I got mad because I was like, what the fuck? I was like,
Why
I've
did
been,
why didn't you see it?
yeah. But also, I had been working with so many different people, and both of them too, and over the years. And I was like, no one brought this up. No one, and mind you, I didn't share it. So you could say, well, you didn't say anything. But some of these people you could, like, when you have the ability to intuit into an energy and you have the ability to see the unseen, I'm expecting you to tell me what I'm not seeing. It
Right.
doesn't always work like that,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, I digress. So that was actually the moment that you can say it was like a bit of a revelation. And then I was like, okay. It wasn't even, honestly, David, it wasn't even a second thought, because the moment that they brought it up, I was like, okay, this is actually the missing puzzle piece.
Yeah,
This
this is
is,
it.
yeah, this is the stone that I have not turned. This is where I have to dive deep, no matter how uncomfortable, no matter how painful, no matter what. I just had to do it. And so I did. And I started therapy, and I needed to find a specific therapist who was trauma trained, trauma informed, had a variety of modalities, because I'm not interested in just the cognitive behavior. I need someone that can go deep. Fortunately, I have, and I've been continuing to work with her for the last 2+ years. And I mean, it's complex because there's moving pieces when you start to break things down. But honestly, if it wasn't for both of those women separately bringing it to my attention, I don't know when I would have actually recognized that that had been a very, very influential and impactful part of my life, my childhood experience that absolutely influenced the woman that I am today, the relationships that I chose and I've entered, and certainly, the leader that I am today too.
Yeah,
So
honestly, it's possible you never would have, frankly, because
yeah,
it takes a special set of circumstances and people to do it, and if you don't find them, it's unlikely you were going to get there
yeah.
like on your own. Um, so
Yeah. And it's funny you say that too, because, when I got mad and I was like, really just kind of not letting it out on my mentors, but I was just like, WTF?
what the fuck? Yeah,
Yeah. And she's like, but honey, you don't understand. Like, there's a time when also your soul becomes ready to face certain parts. And I think that, as modest as it sounds and like spiritual and all, there is relevance there, there's validity there, right? And it's like, okay, so maybe 10 years ago in my early 30s I wouldn't have been ready, and maybe it took, the 10th relationship that just broke me to finally say it's time to surrender, and you really need to face the music,
yeah, yeah.
because this is something that you're not dealing with Not because I didn't want to, I just didn't know. I didn't know.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, sometimes, like you said, it does. If it happens like enough, like over and over and over, then you at some point you'll be like, okay, like this just keeps happening. If it's similar enough, sometimes it's not similar enough, and so we don't connect it quite as easily.
Hmm.
If it's very similar, like whether it's a time frame, like it always happens around a certain time, or it's always whatever, it can become a little bit clearer, and so we can start to do it. But I don't know. I mean, our lives are very busy. We're inundated with a lot of stuff. We
Yeah.
don't always take the time to like really reflect and think more deeply what you're talking about, like really introspective, like, all right, like what is really happening here? What's really going on beneath the surface, right? Not just up here, like really getting down into it. And it's not easy. Like you said, like it's painful, it's hard, it's not fun. And then usually it has to get worse before it gets better. And then you're just like, I don't, it's always easier to just be like, I won't deal with it, like whatever.
Well, and sadly, that often is the choice that a lot of people make, right? And I'll say this for both men and women. So, unfortunately, men have the stereotype that they don't have the emotional depth and maturity to take the time to process an ending of a relationship before they're on to the next. Women, they fall into that camp too, some of them, but more times than not, they will take the time. um, in my case, I was doing that. I just wasn't looking at the right things to heal. So while I may have been working on some things, I wasn't working on the right things. And, you know, unfortunately, the pattern continued. Different patterns were continuing. And, and actually the last, I'd say 2 to 5 years is where my experiences became amplified, like worse in different ways. And I was like, okay, now I'm done. Like, I'm just like, I don't even have the energy, like the energy to keep, entering into something new again and risk this kind of, like ending, right? And this kind of treatment that I was getting. So yeah.
Yeah, we talked when you and I talked about a month ago in kind of preparation for this. One of the things you said that really struck me was like the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself,
Mm,
and that really struck me. And you talked about like the evolution, like there's no end. Um, there is no, you don't do all the work, whether it's therapy or energy or whatever healing modality. It doesn't matter. Like you don't graduate, it doesn't stop, like because as we gain more experiences and we get older and we mature and relationships come and go and jobs come and go and all these things, it's constantly shifting.
mm,
There's always new information, there's always new experiences that we then have to evaluate. So there is no like, I'm all set, all healed, no, we're all good, like we're just gonna ride, we're just gonna coast this out. If you're into it, it's a lifelong journey until we die, right? There's just always more to dig into, to uncover, to figure out. And I think the earlier we do it, the better, because then we start to make better informed decisions, and then we don't cause ourselves so much discomfort along the way. On the flip side, when we do, we learn a lot more, because obviously we always learn more from pain, discomfort, mistakes, failing than we ever do
yes.
from success.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I think you said it perfectly. There's no like point of arrival, right? And in a lot of cases, there's a season and a time where you do the work on your own. Like there's not every part of a healing journey requires someone to be in there with you. There's some things that you have to walk alone, and you shouldn't want someone else involved in that because it's just so sacred and private. And then when it comes to growing and expanding and healing, there's that period where you do that in relationships with others. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be in a romantic dynamic, because as we know, we learn through our friendships as well, and in client relationships. And, when you're working for someone else, you have your peers, your colleagues, your teams, your leader. Everyone is going to contribute in some capacity to your evolution and hopefully your healing. And so both can be true, right? You do some work on yourself where you're spending time being introspective and reflective on understanding what is your role, right, in that dynamic. And then it comes to a point where it's like, okay, now I actually need to apply what I've learned in a romantic situation. That we'll just use that as an example, and learn to heal in relationship. So this is where all the fears come up, all the triggers happen, all of the things that just because you think you worked through doesn't mean that they're completely gone. In some cases they'll show up just to see, okay, how much have you grown?
Yeah,
And this is where you're
like a
able to,
test.
exactly, and this is where you're able to break a pattern. So let's say, for example, you are used to dealing with conflict by walking away. You just shut it down. You emotionally shut down. You don't have the maturity, the capacity to ground yourself because you might be dysregulated. In most cases, you are. You're grounded now, and you're now going to respond. And so you might say, which is completely different than how you might have responded in the past, you might say, you know what? I need a moment to myself. I love you. I care about you, whatever you're going to say, right? I'm going to be back. I need at least an hour. But
Just
you,
to regroup. Yeah.
that's right. But that can, you sort of reaffirm and reassure that connection so that you don't leave someone dangling. Your partner's like, what the hell, like what's going on, right? So and that can only happen in that dynamic because you need someone to trigger that in you,
Yeah.
right?
What do you think? Because you've talked about this recently in your content with the like the romantic, more personal relationships, and then that through line through friendships and like work relationships with coworkers and management. Have you found anything specific that really draws and connects those, or is it more just like the holistic overview?
Are you referring to like experiences that?
Yeah, just like what you're taking, like what you take, not necessarily you personally, but like you in general, but like the way you're showing up
Mm,
with your partner, and then how that you're then showing up with friends and coworkers. Is there anything specific that you've seen repeat or whatever that can cause either like amplified good, like you're doing this at home, so that's helping you outside, or you're doing this at home and that's actually hurting your friendships and your coworker
yeah.
relationships?
So I'll even just share what happens in some of my client dynamics, right? So we'll be working on emotional intelligence, which is a bigger umbrella, but more specifically, it'll be emotional expression.
Hmm.
And so this is your ability to be able to emote and express yourself, your thoughts, your ideas, your feelings in a way that doesn't hurt the other person. So is unharmful, right? And where a leader is practicing that, I've been able to witness where now they're more expressive with their team. So it might be through in their one-to-ones, those dynamics are shifting. They're asking better questions. They're also expressing a concern, an objection, an idea in a way that lands, right? Because they're not unclear. They've prepared, and they're trying to basically build that relationship in the way that allows them to be able to express and communicate more effectively. And so when that is improving, then I've also heard in that same client where their partner is noticing a
Mm.
difference and a shift. So this is obviously the positive,
Yeah.
right? So now their partner is like, wow, honey, like it's so great to hear, you tell me how you really feel. And
Yeah.
I'm always encouraging that let's not just focus or assume that your team or at work is the only opportunity to practice. You have a whole other life. So practice with your friends, practice with your family. And I have to ask the question to get them to reflect on where else is this showing up in your life, because a lot of the times they think it's just at work, and it's like it's actually not. This is likely showing up in other areas. So let's co-create the awareness so we can pay attention to where else we need to maybe put this into practice and see how it feels, right? So that's the best of the examples. On the flip side of that, when it's like not so great, you can use the same thing. They're not emotionally expressive, with their teams. And so it almost disrupts and breaks trust, because when you're not letting people in on how you're feeling, and at work in a leadership dynamic, sometimes there's always timing at play. You have to
Mhm.
discern, like, when's the right time to tell my team that we have to shut this project down, for example, right? That's fair. But you can always still let people in on how you're feeling,
Yeah,
and doing so in a way that is respectful, that's grounded, that's clear, and you're using vocabulary and language that they understand. So you're attaching emotion to it, like, I feel concerned, or I'm a little bit overwhelmed here. And that helps to actually strengthen the relationship, and also it inspires people to now want to share with you, right? So if that's not happening, then that's likely not happening at home either.
for
There's
sure.
really a disconnect in emotional expression, and you're breaking connection. You're not actually feeding or fueling it, because people don't know how you feel, right?
Well, I think sometimes, especially in like longer term relationships, so if you worked like with the same people for a while, or you've had the same employees for a while, or if you're in a longer term relationship, I think we can get to a place where we just feel like we think people can read our minds, and so
Absolutely.
we're having all these thoughts, conflict, doubt, not sure, whatever. But we don't express it because we're like, well, they know. They don't.
No,
They're not mind readers. No matter how much time
no.
they spend with you, or how many
Yeah,
one-on-ones you've had, or whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, they're not. They don't have ESP. Like they're not telepathic. Like tell them, like I'm really struggling with this, or I'm unsure about this, right? And that's what you're talking about. Like you're really building trust by. They're not going to look at you as like that's weak. They're going to be like, oh, okay, well, thanks for letting me know, and then like let's try to figure it out, or we can work on it
right.
together, or whatever. But a lot of times, I think we just are like we get kind of tunnel vision, and we're like, well, I don't know. You just go like heads down, and you don't tell anyone anything, and then they're like, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. And actually, I think it's such a fair point that you mentioned too. And I wish I could remember who said it and where I heard it from. But to your point around, when you're in relationships for a long time, you can get a bit complacent, right? And comfortable. And you just expect, well, like, after all these years, you should know. But I can't remember who said it, but they said something along the lines that if you can enter into your interactions and in the dynamic with that person that you've been in a relationship with the longest, with a sense of curiosity. So kind of asking yourself the question, if I didn't know what I thought I knew about this person, what would I learn? Right? Like, it's such a great question, because you go in with hopefully a more open mind, and you can just ask. You can just ask, right? Like, it might be as simple as you notice the body language, you notice a certain look. Like, I'm sure there's a look that your partner has, and you're like, oh, I know that look. She's pissed. Or the opposite, like, I know that look. She's like over the moon right now, right?
Yeah.
But instead of not saying it or assuming, that you might just ask, like, hey, I'm curious, like, I see a lot of expression on your face, or whatever the observation is, and just ask. And I mean, is it something that you remember all the time? Who knows? But if you can just lead with that curiosity, even in those dynamics where, you've known someone for, gosh, 10, 15, 20 plus years, who knows? What are the possibilities of that connection, and how can things like shift, right?
Yeah, because like we talked earlier, right? It's always changing. So just because you've known someone for a long time, there's always different dynamics in play. That reminds me, one of the other things we talked about was not judging the success of a relationship based on its duration.
Yes.
And that really struck me too, because especially like growing up, you would hear somebody like, oh, we've been married for 30 years or 40 years. And so I was just like, oh,
Yeah.
that's great. Like they must be so happy, right? They've been together for so long. And then you find out like secretly they've been miserable and living apart for 20 years. Um, and you're like, oh, they're just, yeah, okay, so they're just married. Oh, yeah, okay. Um, so so that I think is really interesting because and that was a long time ago, that example, but still, like I think when you hear someone's been together, or even if you've worked, some people I've worked at the same place for whatever a long time, and you're like, oh well, your career must be going great, and you're like, you've been miserable for 10 years, you just haven't left. So I think I think that's a good idea. Like we should stop equating length with happiness and success. That might be the case, but getting back to your curiosity point, maybe we should ask, like, okay, you've been together, you've been with that person for a long time, but like, how do you feel? Like, what are you actually
Right.
getting out of it? Like, has it run its course and you just haven't left, or it's still great, or everything in between?
Yeah. I mean, we've been conditioned to believe because you have to go back to like history, right? And traditionally speaking, relationships were about security and stability. And a lot of the times women were seen as the homemakers and really quite frankly dependent and reliant on the man to provide. And that is what I believe we're going to see shift quite a bit as we continue moving into this like new world that we're all going to be seeing and living in over the years. And so we've tied success to, wow, 51 years. But if we're solely basing it on longevity, I mean, really, it's not a fair assessment because we don't know the dynamics of that. We don't know how much they've grown. We don't know, you know, authenticity, like how much have they been able to actually be true to who they are independently, individually, to really create that sense of fulfillment and safety in the relationship. So I think there's a real opportunity to redefine relationships and really looking at different elements. So like the authenticity. So a lot of the times I think you might have heard this too, is how many times people have after the relationship has ended have said, I never really felt like I could be myself in that relationship. And so that's a metric of success maybe we need to be looking at. How much did you grow? Right? Was it always just kind of the same old, or did you have a partner that you guys could grow together as a union, and then also individually were you supported in your own journey, right? In your own dreams and aspirations and goals? I think that's something else. And a lot, again, if we compare to traditionally speaking, what we've always seen, women have sacrificed so much, right? In those relationships, in those marriages, where you don't hear about their dreams and aspirations. They kind of were left by the wayside. So,
Yeah.
like, my parents have been married for 51 years. And I know because I remember it wasn't always roses and sunshine, right? But they overcame it and they stayed together, right? But you don't really always know what goes behind, like what happens behind closed doors. So I think it's, when people are like, "Wow, what's your secret?" It's like, well, you won't really know, even if they tell you.
Yeah, because it's right. Well, yeah, because it's so different for everyone. Um, that's amazing. 51 years is amazing. My parents divorced when I was 2, so it's pretty much the polar opposite. Uh,
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
um, but yeah, I mean, again, it's all different. That so you talked about like being yourself. In my first podcast was called "The Real You," and the genesis behind that was the mask that we all wear, some more than others. But I wore a lot of masks, and part of it was with divorced parents, and so I was saw my dad separately, lived with my mom. I had dad's side of the family, mom's side of the family. Then I had neighborhood friends, then I had school friends, then I had sports teams. So I was like kind of a different person in almost every one of those settings. I
Mm,
was constantly like taking one mask off, putting another mask on. And as I got older, I dropped some of them because I didn't have to deal with those situations as much. But I still, like, especially through work and my career, like I did never felt like I could truly be myself. So then as I got like into my 30s and then into my 40s, then I was like, gosh, it's so exhausting. Like trying to remember like who am I supposed to be today, or who am I supposed to be in this setting? Like, God, can I just be myself? Like, can I just say what I normally would say? Like, God, it'd be so nice if I could do that. So it's interesting that you talk about that. Like if you're in a relationship and you find yourself like either hiding part of yourself, or you're like, oof, I don't know, it doesn't go that well when I'm like this. And then you're like, okay, I won't do that. Like you have to, that's really be aware of that, because you really want as much as possible to be with someone that you can just like let your guard down and be like, this is who
Yeah.
I am. Like if that's not for you, then that's fine. But
And it's funny that you say the hiding part because I've often faced this when I'm dating someone. Is, you come into my condo. Number one, it's Zen. So, like, everyone says the same thing, like, wow, it's like so Zen here. I'm like, don't get too comfortable because you're leaving. So, like, this is my Zen.
I didn't
But
build this for you.
exactly. But I have on my coffee table what I call my little altar, and it's got crystals, and I have angels, and I have feathers, and on my wall here, which you can't see, but I keep it up intentionally. And this is the beauty of living on your own, is you can put shit on your wall and no one has to see it. But I have like my white long lined paper, and it has my affirmations on there, and my pillars of that I stand by in like my life, my business. And there has been a few instances where someone new comes in. I'm like, oh shit, gotta hide. Like, I
I don't want them
take,
to. I don't want
yeah,
them to see this. Yeah.
because I didn't know how to explain it. And then I also didn't want like the judgment. I feared the judgment and like any projection. I was like, no, this is like my private stuff. So since then, I've number one, obviously, I'm not going to let anyone into my space that I don't feel 100% like comfortable and safe with. But now, actually, I've left it, and it's like the complete opposite. And no one's actually ever said anything negative. Everyone's actually often intrigued, and it sparks a really interesting conversation. And it's a good way for me to see how people respond when I'm letting in them into like a very small part of my world, right? Because if they're going to react weird, then I just know, like, oh, thank you so much. Like,
For
thank God for
showing me that.
being revealing,
Yeah.
right? Because now I'm never going to see you again.
Right.
Right?
You made it easy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's part of the authenticity part is, and even at work, actually, going back to my corporate days, I remember also just not really sure, how do I like share this like spiritual side of me? How do I talk about it? And actually, it was towards the very end of my time where I ended up discovering one of my colleagues who was also pretty spiritually inclined. And she was like a Reiki master. And I'm like, Leah, I didn't know that
No
you
idea.
no. And she's like, we're having this like, water cooler moment at a sales meeting we're both at. And she's like, oh, yeah, they're telling me that you need to ground more. I was like, my guides are talking to you. So it was like a beautiful moment. And it made me realize, like, had I had the courage and found, or even just created the opportunities to let people into that, what that could have done for some of these relationships at the
Yeah, it's hard. It's harder. I think it's when you get older, it's easier because we just give less fucks, right? Like you go through enough, and then you're just like, I just this is it. Like you're just
This
like
is it. Yeah.
these are the cards. Like I'm not
Yeah.
changing. I'm no longer shuffling the deck. Like these are the fucking cards. You like them or you don't.
Yes.
But younger, we don't. It's much harder because we have a lot more judgment. We're a little more careful. We want people to like us, whether it's a partner or a friend, a worker, whatever. So we're a little more guarded. We're not sure. Age and maturity and life experience definitely helps start to be like, all right, like I just can't pretend anymore, or I just can't hide this part of me anymore. Like this is just who I am. So like you either accept this and you're good, or you're not. If you're not, that's fine. Like there are other options. But when you're like 25, you're like, nope, this got to be it. I got to make this one work. I got to force this one or whatever. Like it's just different. It's weird psychologically,
Yes.
but it's so freeing. And that's part of why I'm having a hard time like going back to work because I don't. I just don't fit in an office. Like I don't.
Yeah.
It's just not. I'm not really wired to be a coworker. Like I don't want to hear about your weekend. I don't care about
Yeah.
your kid's baseball game. I don't, and I don't hide that much anymore. Like the look on my face is typically like, I don't know why we're still talking.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, that guy's a dick. He's not very friendly. It's like, no, that's actually just who he is. He doesn't care about he doesn't want to talk to
The
you about
problem
that.
is like, if we really get honest about corporate environments, there is still a lot of inauthenticity.
Oh
And I
yeah.
feel like For someone like for me, you strike me as someone who really is authentic and you feel very comfortable in who you are. And in my experience, it's been such where when you do, get into environments where you can tell when people aren't being authentic and they're not being true to your heart, that's frustrating. That's annoying.
Mm,
And it makes it hard to be around over a long period of time
yeah.
because then it starts to influence you if you want to stay in that environment. And imagine then having to show up and work day after day, it does take its toll on you. So I feel like that could be also just an element for some people, maybe for yourself when you think about it. It's like,
Well, my problem was the older I got, the more honest I was, and so I would just tell people like that idea is not going to work. You didn't think that
that's
one through,
authentic. And that's
right?
also honest.
And then they would be like, "We don't want you. That's not why you're here. Like, we don't want
Yeah.
your opinion." Like, I'm going to give it anyway.
Yeah.
Um, I was I had a phone screen yesterday for a job I don't want, which is a whole nother
Mhm.
story. But at the end of the 30 minutes, and I didn't think they still asked this question, especially on a phone screen, but they asked me like where I saw myself in 5 years,
Good
which
Lord.
is like just so
So
cliched,
dated.
and it just it's just such a bad question because like most of us are just trying to get through like the next 5 days, and then
Yeah.
like 5 months, I don't know, like 5 years, like
Yeah.
how does anybody say that
I
with like any
know. That feels
sincerity?
like a
So
very inexperienced recruiter or whoever you spoke to.
yeah, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I didn't say what the first thing that popped into my head because that would have they would have hung up on me. But I also didn't give like a very clear answer because I was just like, I don't know. But yeah, like as I've gotten older, I definitely finding the online space has helped a lot, like creating content and writing content. It forces me to think, and I'm going through a lot of these situations, whether it was childhood or it's a lot of work type stuff, and I so writing and thinking about it is cathartic, and
Yes.
it's an evolution process where you look back at situations, write about them, and then you see them and you process them differently, and so that helps be more honest and like knowing what lane I'm supposed to be driving in now and all that kind of stuff. Um, but again, that takes time, and not everybody's posting
It
content.
does. And
But
it's a journey. It's
yeah,
a journey, right? Like, when you're looking to really be more true to who you are and lead with more authenticity, it's not a one and done. There's no time frame because you have to also think how much conditioning we've had over the years and what society's messaging is when it tells you to just show up as who you are. But then, in reality on the ground, when you do, you'll get different, projections and different um, reactions to that authenticity. And so you really are, you know, on this continuum of aligning yourself and really discovering who you are and understanding who you are. And part of that comes with a lot of disappointing other people as well. And that's part
yeah,
of
and
it.
I think you get to the point where you're okay with disappointing people because like
Mhm.
you're like, this is just who I am, and if you're not okay with that, then like that's cool. Like
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
doesn't bother me. Um, what advice if someone's out there struggling, whether it's no matter what the relationship or multiple areas of their relationships, what could they do? What small steps that not like totally change the world, change their life steps, which seem too big. Typically, it starts smaller, obviously. Um, like what's one or two things they could start to notice, observe, think about, reflect on that could start to shift the movement in their favor.
Yeah. So, I mean, number one is you have to be honest with yourself and you have to be willing to look in the mirror because so often when we're trying to make any sort of change, it's very easy to project out onto the world and say, well, if he does this, then I can do that.
Mm.
Right. Or if this changes, then I can do X. I'll be more comfortable to do X. And it really has to start with you. So you have to be honest with where you're at in your life and what do you desire for your reality? Are you looking for more fulfillment in your relationships, romantically, your friendships, work, family? Then what does that look like? And what is your role in that? So, honesty and really doing a sincere and in-depth audit on your role in that dynamic, which means if you're expecting people, because I love the word expect you to give me your all. Are you giving your all? And what does that look like?
Yeah.
Right? You want people to, I don't know, include you more. Do you include others? Right? So it's always about reflecting on your part in that dynamic, but you have to be honest. And I think a lot of the times people say they're doing something or they believe they are and they're really not,
Yeah.
right? And so this isn't to condemn you. We don't want to be being so judgmental and critical of ourselves. We want to lead with compassion when you're doing a very sincere audit, but you do have to be honest with where you're at and what your role is in that, and then honestly take the one micro step that allows you to make a shift. And that might be it, right? That might be, for the first time in my life, I'm actually vocalizing and saying, I'm not okay with this relationship anymore. Or these friendships. How many times do we hear people, oh, I've known her since kindergarten? Okay. She does this a little bit and she hasn't been great here. So why are you still friends with her?
Right.
Right? And I have to preface this with like a caveat. This doesn't mean with a sledgehammer start cutting people off, because that's also like pretty toxic when we're just
Yeah.
kind of slaying, like, you're out, you're out. But it's just about being honest with the relationships that you do have in your life as well. And so, who are the people that uplift you? Who are the people that are respecting you and actually value you? Do they treat you well? Do they accept you for who you are and all of who you are? We evolve, right? And we
Yeah.
go through growth spurts and changes where maybe in a season or a stage of your life, you weren't your greatest, right? Maybe you weren't disrespectful to people, but you just weren't your best. So, did they love you then? Or did they take off because you're like, what the hell's this? Like,
Yeah. I don't.
she's
Right.
not my cup of tea, right?
Yeah.
Look for the people that can accept you and grow with you. And it's okay if it ends up being, you know what? After I did the audit, after I was honest with myself, I realized 2 out of these 5 friendships is no longer aligning with who I am and where I want to go, right?
Yeah, no, I think that those are great tips, and I think the energy point there you made towards the end, that's something I'm trying to pay more attention to in my own life, relationships, decisions that I'm making, and like really trying to assess how they're affecting my energy because I didn't do that for a long time, and I would ignore it, so it would affect my energy negatively, but I would do it anyway because it seemed like the smart thing or the logical thing or whatever, and then I'd get into it and be like, this this doesn't make me feel good. I'm not aligned. And then you just, whatever, you can get on a path like that. And then you just keep struggling with it. But I think especially with like people, I notice it more in person, but you can do it online as well. But like, do they, like, how do they make you feel, right? Is your energy good or does it rise with them or is it draining? Or you're like, oh, I'm so exhausted after spending an hour with them or whatever. I think that's a real indicator of everything else. Like if you're not sure, measure your energy.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, sometimes you don't notice it because, like, for example, you might be the friend that everyone comes to for advice. And it's like, okay, but at some point, there's got to be a boundary where you can't be the therapist, the counselor, the psychologist all the time, right? There's got to be, okay, I'm happy to give you some guidance. I'm happy to listen, but maybe after a certain point of hearing the same conversation 10 times over and nothing changing because they don't want to change, that you say, listen, sweetheart, why don't you call a therapist? Because, like, I got to keep some of this behind the paid wall, like, I'm not even charging you. So you would never say that to a friend, but you know what I
Right.
mean? So
Yeah.
there's boundaries there, but absolutely check in with your energy, and it is a good indication, but understanding why. Are they taking so much from you? Are they expecting you? Like, are you always the one that's giving? Is it imbalanced because maybe you're the one initiating plans, always the one that's calling? Little things that you may not take stock of, but then when you're spending time with them and you start to think, okay, well, the last 6 months we've done all these things and I've been the one to do most of them. And then maybe right now there's a period where they're just siphoning you. And it's sometimes so subtle, like you won't even be able to specify or pinpoint one thing, but it's just like some sort of a leeching energy. It's a tricky one. Pay attention.
It's all tricky in life and relationships.
Yeah.
Um, well, this has been great. We could go a couple more hours, and there's
Mm,
a lot of different directions to go. We'll pause it here for now. Um, Super grateful you came on. Love
so
your
happy to be
insight.
here.
Tell people if they're interested in learning more. I know you do a yearly event in
Yeah.
Toronto around May timeframe, I believe. And then working with you, if you want to talk about that, I'll put it in the show notes as well. But if you want to plug that, if people are interested in learning more, how to find you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can find me there. Also on Instagram, can find me there. The content more or less is the same. All my services you can find on my website. The event for next year, her leads experience, is happening in May. That will be coming out probably in the new year sometime in terms of like promotion and details and all that. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, really appreciate your time. Thanks everybody for
Thank
listening.
you.
If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow and find Lisa on Instagram and LinkedIn. Follow the show, hit like, subscribe. If you want to leave a review, I wouldn't be mad. That really helps other people. It really helps other people
Love
find
it.
it. So, see you next week because what you're looking for, it's not out there. It's underneath. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, David.